What's going on, everybody? My name is Badatui, and today I'm bringing you guys something a little bit different. This series was inspired by Pokey and God, that's not his name.
Joey's.
Yes, this series was inspired by Joey Pokey MD's viability rankings per tier. So, like, he started the OU tier viability rankings. He went to RU next. And we're essentially going to be doing the same thing, but in terms of draft format. So we're going to be going through each tier, starting from OU, going all the way down, and then we're going to be talking about each individual mon, how they do in draft format, whether or not they're better in standard or in draft, and all of that. However, I'm not doing this alone. I'm joined by a good friend of mine. Please introduce yourself.
What's up, guys? I am Schady. I lost to Mono and I play draft format, and I'm in the PPL, and I'm still better than Mono.
A couple of those things are true, but yes, I'm joined by Schady. He has a very high success record in draft format. As long as you're not looking, as long as you're not looking at championships, then yes, he has a very high success rate. But regardless, we're gonna start this off in the OU tier, like I mentioned. We're just gonna go in alphabetical order, as you can see on screen. And I'll let you take the first one, because I know we probably have a little bit of a different opinion on this one. You can start off with Amoonguss.
Sure. Amoonguss is a fat guy. That's very obvious. I currently have Amoonguss in the GPC, actually. And I think in my draft analysis for the PPL, I said I don't like it that much. But I'm actually starting to like it a lot more. It's really bulky. The grass poison typing is pretty solid in a lot of scenarios. Regenerator is just fucking gorgeous ability. You can run pretty much anything that defensively. If you want to Phys Def, Spit Def, or even mixed defensive is pretty much always a really, really good option. Unless you're looking for a really, really powerful threat like a Zoomroll. And it has okay offenses. 85 is not bad.
Higher than Talonflame.
Stronger than Talonflame. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
That's kind of cool. Also, the same attack as Mega Gardevoir, which is funny. Yeah, it's just a really bulky Pokemon. What I personally don't like as much is that's a little bit passive. People are gonna probably have safety goggles, which makes Spore a lot less of a safe move to click. Not as safe as an OU, and in general, not league play. But you can also see it as an advantage because you have to run safety goggles. That's an item your opponent isn't running, not a life orb or anything like that. So it can be seen as an advantage, and I think Amoonguss works well with a good core and things that prevent opponents from setting up. Not that it doesn't have Clear Smog, it's obviously a choice, but for Moonslot Syndrome and whatnot, it's definitely a thing with Amoonguss pretty much every time, but it's just a very good pivot with the Regenerate ability. It's ridiculous bulk, and Spore being annoying if your opponent doesn't have safety goggles.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No.
Okay. So yeah, like you mentioned, this thing is a very good bulky wall. It also is a very nice bulky pivot. You can send this thing into attacks, take them on. Even if it's a 2-hit, you can switch out and get Regenerator back so that you can deal with them later. Like you said, it can be susceptible to setup, even though it does have access to things like Foul Play and Clear Smog. It's really not good versus substitute users because they sub on your Spore or on your Clear Smog, and you obviously don't get rid of the boosts. It's relatively one-dimensional. It can do a couple different things. Like, I've seen offensive before, but it's not very good. Like, Sludge Bomb and Giga Drain are pretty good dual stabs, but it doesn't have a very high special attack stat, and usually you're going to want to run this thing bulky to take hits from water types or from opposing grass types and things like that. And its move pool is not terrible, but it's relatively shallow. You're going to be running moves like Sludge Bomb, Clear Smog, Giga Drain, Spore, a Hidden Power, maybe Stun Spore, maybe occasionally Synthesis. There's not a ton that this thing can do, but it is very good at what it does. This is a mon that moved up to OU relatively recently just because of usage, because it ended up being a very good check to things like Keldeo, Breloom, just a lot of attackers in the tier. Mega Diancie, it is not too KO'd by Mega Lopunny after Stealth Rock, which is really, really nice. So it is a very good defensive pivot. It definitely fits on a lot of teams. Like, a lot of people want their Fire, Water, Grass cores. This thing typically goes relatively early just because it fits on that Fire, Water, Grass. It fits on most Fire, Water, Grass cores very well. Being able to have access to instant recovery, Regenerator, like you mentioned, is what makes this thing really, really good. And it pairs well with a lot of different mons. Like, for example, on my DBA team that I inherited. It works very well with the Azumarill because you can spore something, and then if they stay asleep, you can threaten your opponent with Belly Drum. It also works with other wall breakers as well, because suppose you put, suppose you pair this thing with, I don't know, let's pretend like... Salmon, sure. Yeah, Salmon. It works really well with setup sweepers, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, you can put something to sleep and then set up on them, or you can just pair this thing with just a straight-up offensive mon. You can maybe put the thing that walls your offensive mon to sleep, and then you can just keep spamming attacks with that thing, because while they're asleep, they obviously cannot recover up, and it's just able to break down teams like that. So it's not necessarily... It's good on its own, but it really functions best when you pair it with a solid team, as with any mon, of course, but... It's a really good supportive mon for the rest of your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, you know, part of the legendary regenerator course, which are always annoying. Moongus plus Slow Bro or Slow King is just really, really gross and not fun to play against, because you can just constantly pivot around between it, and your opponent might get a little annoyed. You know, might get chip damage off on his thing with Rocky Helmet and whatnot, and you can just kind of, you know, carry on through a game like that. Has happened before. Not fun for your opponent. Very fun for you.
Yep, absolutely. So Amoongus, good mon, good team player, can sometimes do setup fodder. Also, I guess one thing that's like, I guess kind of a personal thing, I don't like having... I hate that this thing can be burnt by Scald, which I guess is like everything, but it's like you're gonna use this thing a lot of times as your bulky water switch in, and then you get burnt, and then your Black Sludge is useless. Yeah. And then, even though you have recovery, it's just still annoying because burn is stupid. But that's like with literally any Pokemon because Scald is broken. But with that being said, that's Amoongus covered. We're now going to move on to a mon I actually mentioned a little bit that goes well with Amoongus, and that is Azumarill. So Azumarill is a mon that I think started off in draft like at the very beginning of draft format. It was really, really solid, and then people kind of stopped using it, and then now it's kind of resurging as a powerhouse. Doesn't get drafted as often as I think I would expect it to, because it is still really, really good. But Azumarill is very threatening in the format. Its dual stab in Play Rough and Water, even just Play Rough, like Fairy Stab, is just generally very good. It's extremely spammable. Plus you have things like Knockoff, you have Priority Aqua Jet, you even have things like Ice Punch. You have Power Up Punch if you're running like an Assault Vest set and you don't need the extra coverage. You can boost your attack without having to lower your HP with Belly Drum. It has Super Power, which hits incredibly hard and is really good for things like Ferrothorn and just Steel types in general, for it being able to hit those things very hard. It does have a couple of gimmicky sets that we'll get into in a little bit, but the most common sets, both in draft format and in standard, are Assault Vest, Banded, and Belly Drum, which do work very, very well, because your opponent's going to be... It can confuse your opponent a little bit. Your opponent's not going to be entirely sure what set it is, so sometimes they'll be forced to sack a Pokemon just to try and get off an attack, because if you are Belly Drum, and they don't know, or if you're not Belly Drum, but they don't know that, they'll be forced to stay in trying to get off damage onto this thing so that you can't Belly Drum, meanwhile you just knock them out with an attack. So it's a very scary mon for your opponent to deal with. Obviously, it's very hindered by its speed. Base 50 is not very good at all. Even if you max invest, you're still not outspeeding uninvested base 100s and things like that, so it can be susceptible to faster hitters, but it does make up for that a bit with its bulk. It's not amazing, but base 100 HP paired with base 80 defenses is very solid. Its typing is also very solid as well, being weak to electric, poison, and grass. Am I missing anything? I don't think so.
No.
Which are not the most... Not that they're uncommon, but if they're unstabbed, they're usually not OHKOing Azumarill. And with this thing's attack stat just being base 50, obviously it doesn't look that great, but it gets access to huge power. So if you run Adamant max attack at level 100, you have 436 attack, which is a lot. Pair that with a Choice Band or a Pixie Plate or a Splash Plate, it's going to be hitting things very, very hard.
Yeah, I have to play Azumarill next week, so I kind of don't want to talk about it because it makes me really, really sad. But I think I'm just going to go into the more gimmicky options right away. Because the set that always scares me the most, like a sub-Belly Drum Salac variant, something like that. I've seen it before, it's really, really terrifying. Because if you prep for Belly Jet Azumarill, you're going to prep for having something that can live a +6 Aqua Jet and can kill it, pretty much. But if your opponent's playing the sub, gets off a Belly Drum, gets +6 attack and +1 speed because of the Select Berry, you can die to a player off and you're going to be really, really sad and you're probably going to lose. So that's not a really threatening set of Azumarill offensively. However, because you mentioned the pretty solid bulk, it also has options of running Thick Fat or Sap Sipper, which Sap Sipper makes it wall a lot of Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the typing combined with the grass immunity just shuts down things like Superior completely. There's nothing you can do unless your opponent wants to be the one guy running HP Electric for a potential Sap Sipper Azumarill. I don't think that's happening ever. Or Poison, you know. It gets Parry Song, it gets Whirlpool, which I think you have to run Thick Fat with that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you do, unfortunately.
Which is silly, but, you know, Pokemon. So the thing, not only is it one of the biggest offensive threats in my opinion, like Water and Fairy, just ridiculously good offensive stab moves, it can be really solid defensive one in certain matchups. You know, if you run defensive, you're probably going to end up running Scald, and as we mentioned before, Scald is fucking broken. Even coming off of base 60 special attack, Homer fucking Azumarill. Like, I hate Azumarill. Can we, like, not allow that? It's not broken, I just don't want to play it. Like, yeah. Fairy switch-ins they're not many, and a lot of them just don't appreciate Water Step at all. So combination is really, really spicy. You can fake bans with, like, as before mentioned, Splash Blade and whatnot. And your opponent is probably not going to know what set you are until it's too late. And that's one of the scary parts of Azumarill in draft format.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Azumarill is one of those Pokemon where you can start prepping for it, and then you'll realize that it 2-KOs or OKOs your entire roster. Even if it just had like 10 or 15 more speed, then I think it would be incredibly good, just because like a base 60 Scarfer is still good enough. Like if you run Scarf sets a little bit more reliably and still hit things very hard, but base 50 still is not absolutely much. And that is really the only thing that's holding it back is its speed, because it's an incredible wall breaker. It does have priority Aqua Jet, a very powerful Aqua Jet, to help out in terms of its lack of speed, but yeah, it's just one of those mons that hits incredibly hard. Usually takes at least one hit, and then will be able to knock something out. And you do have to, your opponent will have to play the mind game of, is it going to set up a belly drum? Is it just going to be banded into a KO something? Is it going to be some sort of plate? What is it going to be? And until you figure that out, you're in trouble. And usually, in order to figure it out, you're going to end up losing a Pokemon just because it hits so incredibly hard.
Yeah.
So, with the Azumarill being covered now, we are going to move on to another mon that you don't see too often in draft format, and that is Bisharp. So, Schady, why don't you start off with Bisharp?
Bisharp, I'm so sorry, my friend. Why are you so bad? Okay, Bisharp, 125 attack, cool. Dark Stab, Steel Stab, two really good stabs, especially in combination. The issue with that combination of stabs is that you're 4 times weak to fighting, and everything gets a fighting move, even if just hidden power fighting. The thing doesn't have good special defense, like 65 SP, 70 speed F is not good at all, which is why occasionally you see Assault Vest on the ladder. Probably has been used in draft format a couple times as well. It's not reliable. It's just not. Bishop used to be one of the scariest sweepers in like standard play. In draft, it really could never fill that role, just because it's really, really easy to check in my opinion. I'm just not a fan of Bishop. The 4 times weakness plus it being slow, 70 speed is not great. Makes it really easy to check. Just has to resist Sucker Punch, or can take Sucker Punch even at +2, which is not too hard, and can easily kill it, which again is not hard. So yeah, Bishop is not as good, but it still has its things going for it. Defiant is a great ability, being able to prevent your opponent from safely defogging, because if they defog, +2 Bishop is not something to fuck around with, depending on your defogger especially. Like, there are defoggers that can potentially beat this, but if it's like a Lottie, you're gonna be in trouble. I can speak English. So like, standard Bishop is still cool. Like SD is always threatening. Like Lumberry, whatnot, are all really good options in draft play. And it gets like more unusual moves like Psycho Cut to hit like fighting types that might want to switch and whatnot. Rock Polish, which is a decent option. You know, not the greatest, but it's there. Taunt is cool, but it just doesn't, like, I guess T-Wave too, but it's T-Wave Bishop. It just doesn't get to pull any of its like unusual options off, because it just doesn't work with its typing and its stats. The best thing it does is just click knockoff and sucker punch and hope that things die, which they probably will because Bishop is still really, really strong. 120 pep attack is nothing to mess around with, but I think it's just way too easy to check and play around. Like, Cobbleberry is way too common of an item. Even Viability can be used against it. Well, like, even no item on certain things that are not weak to dark. They can just chew a knockoff and just kill it back. Very easy to check. I just don't like Bishop. I'm sorry, Bishop. It's not that great. Especially like, I think like UCL drafting style, this thing is not worth an OU pick, ever. That's my opinion.
Alright, well now I have to do a little bit of editing, so thank you. I do agree with you. It's not nearly as good in draft than it is in standard. Like you said, knockoff plus Iron Head are really good dual stabs. Its attack stat is really solid. It has decent physical defense, being able to take a decent number of those hits. 70 speed is just not super great. Like, you're being outsped by you're being outsped by Nidoking in your O code, you're being outsped by Mamoswine in your O code, and you need chip damage off onto them before you can knock them out with Sucker Punch. And while this thing has, I believe, the strongest Sucker Punch in the game, I could be wrong about that, it is a very, very powerful move and very powerful priority move. You know your opponent's going to be running it like 99% of the time, and Sucker Punch on Bisharp is relatively easy to play around. Like, if you run sub on a mon, it doesn't matter if this thing gets up to +6. If you run sub and a move to hit this thing, you're usually going to beat it unless they win every single mind game and go for knockoff on your sub, and at that point they'd have to even predict your sub, which isn't always going to happen. So Bisharp can definitely clean up teams. Like, after Swords Dance, Sucker Punch OHKOs a lot that isn't resisted, and then a lot of the slower things you can OHKO with Iron Head or knockoff. But like you said, it's just not super reliable. It can be checked relatively easy defensively. It can be checked offensively relatively easy by priority or just by fighting attacks, ground attacks, things like that. It can't necessarily switch into fairies because it takes things like Moonblast neutrally due to its secondary dark typing. There are a couple other sets that this thing has that I do enjoy running, or that you can run. Stash Lead with rocks is okay. Like, it does get access to Stealth Rock, and you can do that if you want to. It's not necessarily the best set, but you can set up rocks. You can get off chip damage with Sucker Punch, so it does work as a suicide lead. If your opponent tries to defog, you're obviously getting the Defiant boost, which is really nice. And the other set, which I have actually started to like a lot, is the Scarf set with knockoff Iron Head, Pursuit, and Stone Edge. And what this allows you to do is catch your opponent off guard, because you're going to be extra fast and whatnot. You outspeed things like Raikou, which is really, really nice, and you can get off a lot of damage with knockoff. Even though you are going to be running Jolly, you don't have the extra power behind it as you would with the Life Orb set. You're still hitting things very hard with Stab Knockoff and Stab Iron Heads from a base 125 attack stat, so it really hurts things a lot. It can be a decent Pursuit Trapper with the Choice Scarf as well, because you're going to be able to outspeed things like Gengar, and it eliminates some mind games like, are they going to go for a Focus Blast, are they going to go for a Will-O-Wisp, are they going to switch out, are they going to stay in? You can just click Pursuit and usually knock them out with a little bit of damage, which is really, really nice. And then Scarf Stone Edge is really good in general. With the Scarf, you outspeed things like Torn-T as well, and you can OHKO those things depending on its EV spread, depending on whether or not you have Rocks up, but I think that's just, Scarf is probably my favorite set just because it eliminates the mind games that Bisharp usually has. Like, you don't always have to go for Sucker Punch because you just generally outspeed them and things like that. So, also, if you do get the Defiant boost and you are a Choice Scarf, sometimes you can just click Knockoff and win the game, which is always fun because you're a super speedy +2 knockoff thing. Or if you're having a hard time with knockoff, you can't stand knockoff, just flinch things to death with Iron Head, because why not?
That's what good players do.
Yes. Absolutely. So, Bisharp overall not as good in draft format as it is standard. Still viable. It still functions as a Pursuit Trapper, functions as a Scarfer, functions as a Sucker Punch sweeper, but not nearly as reliably in standard. So, that is Bisharp. We've given our opinion on that. Let us now move on to another mon. All these 4 mons you typically don't see too often in draft. I guess the Moongift is the most common in draft just because people always want to draft it. It fits on a lot of teams. But a mon that I think has a lot more potential or a mon that I think does have a lot of potential in the format that hasn't been seen a lot, is Breloom. So Breloom is a pretty cool Pokemon. In Standard, you're typically going to see either Sash or Life Orb. You run like 3 attacks Spore, or you run like 2 attacks Spore SD, 3 attacks SD, things like that. Big thing that this thing does is Technician, so moves like Bullet Seed are going to be boosted. Mach Punch is going to be boosted. You have basically Stab Rock Tomb, which is really nice, goes up to a base 90 rock move that you're using to slow down your opponent, so you finally have a somewhat accurate rock move on something other than Diancie, which is nice. Like I mentioned earlier, it has access to Spore, being able to put your opponent to sleep. It is a faster Spore user than a Moongift, which makes it really nice. It's an offensive Spore user. There are obviously things that hold this mon back. Like, its only solid stat is its attack stat at base 130, but what's nice is with the 130 attack stat, with Technician, your Mach Punch is hitting as hard as as regular Scizor's Bullet Punch, which is really, really nice, because priority coming off of a 130 attack stat with Technician is just always really solid. Granted, fighting is not typically as spammable as Bullet Punch. As Steel, it's still really, really nice, and it does hit very hard. And even though this thing's move pool is kind of shallow, like it's walled by grass types, it's walled by a lot of poison types, it hits pretty much everything else very hard. Like, as you can see, like Bullet Punch, Mach Punch, Rock Tomb are typically the moves you're going to be running on it. It does get Sludge Bomb, but it has a terrible special attack stat. It does get access to Thunder Punch, which you're not going to run ever, because I didn't even know it got Thunder Punch until I scrolled down.
I did.
And you have Grass Stab, obviously, to hit water types.
No, it's for those Pelibus.
Ah, that's right. They're always on teams, right?
The biggest threats in draft.
70 speed, similar to Bisharp, well, exactly the same as Bisharp, but it's slow. Thankfully, it does have powerful priority to kind of help it out. But like I said, Mach Punch not as spammable as other priority moves, or as other types of attacks. Jesus Christ, English. And then it's just extremely frail. 60 HP, 80 defense is okay, but then 60 HP, 60 Spit F is just kind of terrible. So if you like try and switch this thing in an electric type, which first of all never do, but like if you're switching into electric type, sometimes you just go straight down to an HP Ice. It has to be like a very powerful HP Ice, but you're still not taking that well at all, and you're always going to get 2 KO'd, and it's just not a fun time. But this thing does thrive offensively, and one move that I didn't mention that this thing gets, which obviously can be very risky, is Natural Gift, because usually teams have like 1 or 2 switch-ins to Breloom. It's going to be their bulky grass type, or like their bulky poison type, or something like that. Maybe your bulky flying type, even though you have Rock Tomb. I suppose it takes rock neutrally or something like that, like I guess Skarmory. You can set up an SD on their switch into that thing, and then you can hit them with a Natural Gift. For example, in Standard, this thing is completely walled by Amoonguss, and you can OHKO Amoonguss with a +2 Natural Gift Flying or Natural Gift Psychic or whatever else. Typically, people switch into their grass type as well, because obviously they cannot be spored. So if you can get into your opponent's head, you know exactly what their switching is going to be. You can really use Natural Gift to your advantage versus them. Also, I'll save that one for you. Schady, if you want to talk about the Poison Heal set now, you can.
Oh god. Poison Heal is really, really annoying. It's like Gen 4, I think. Ever since Gen 4 it hasn't been used that much. But Gen 4 Poison Heal was good. It's still somewhat viable because Poison Grass is actually really, really good defensive typing. Resisting good old legendary Edgequake and whatnot is pretty spicy. Just in general having some decent resistances, a lot of things can't touch it too much. You have to running Bulk Up and Leech Seed with those 2 moves that are not too common on Breloom, but can be used on that set especially. Just be really, really annoying, put things to sleep, and then just go from there. Potentially beat grass types with Bulk Up depending on what grass type your opponent has, and just heal up a lot of HP, especially if you run Drain Punch as well, which is usually going to be the set you run. Like, you have options with Poison Heal as well, which is cool. 9 times out of 10 you're going to run Technician, but if you run Poison Heal, your opponent is probably going to get annoyed. You're probably going to get a kill with it, because, Poison Heal is a really, really stupid ability, shout out to Gliscor. Yeah. Other things that I also want to mention is it gets Iron Tail, which if your opponent wants to think that their bulky fairy is their best switch-in, it's not. Even though Bolty probably does like the same, depending on how many hits you get. I would get 2, so it doesn't matter. I think I've only seen Breloom used well by one person ever, which is my buddy Jolt.
Yeah, speaking of getting 2 hits.
I'm sorry, Joel, it wasn't me. Yeah, I think he made me think, okay, Breloom isn't actually as, underwhelming as I thought it was. He was really, really well in the NPL. I also saw George use it in the March Madness. He used Natural Gift. Everyone was like, oh my god, Natural Gift Breloom, how exciting. I was like, yeah, it was kind of obvious. As the, when you run Natural Gift Breloom, you also have Mind Games, because your opponent, depending on their skill level, is probably going to expect if you set up an SD with Breloom when there's Nimungus around, you're probably going to have Natural Gift, or you're just a bad player, depending on how things go. Or you're bluffing, which is also always a cool thing to do. Breloom is a mon that forces Mind Games as well, because I have been focus punched by Breloom before. It was not fun. Rest in peace, Shaman. The thing has options. Usually you're just gonna run Life Orb, or whatever the fuck you want, Sash, Mach Punch, and go to town with that. Having priority is always really, really good in draft format, because it prevents you from getting straight up swept by certain things. Yeah, Breloom is kind of a cool guy. Again, I don't know if it's worth like a tier 1, tier 2, I don't know what tier it is in GBA, or like an OU pick, depending on the format you draft in, but if it fits your team, I would definitely say pick it. It does things, it does ow, and it definitely forces prep, just like a move does with Spore and whatnot. Yeah, that's pretty much that. Also, run Effect Spore. Be that guy. Do it.
Don't run Effect Spore.
Don't actually, no. So I guess that's Breloom?
Yeah, that's Breloom. It's not great, but it's a cool mon.
It does
if it's later down on the draft and you see it's still there and you have the points for it, and you don't have a fighting type or whatever, just grab it. It's not bad.
Even if you have a fighting type, fighting spam is really, really good.
It is. If you need priority, it's there. If you want to put things to sleep, it's there. It's got some good options for your team, and it's good in itself.
Yeah. So we're gonna move on to the next Pokemon.
Oh yeah.
Why do I get all the bad Pokemon? Like Bishop, Chansey. Okay, Chansey's the next mon. Fat piece of shit. No one likes it. It's not good in draft format. I don't know for how many seasons. Who has it? Dan. That's him. He's gonna draft it, and until he realizes it's not good, like at all. He makes people think it's good because he has good teams, but it's not. Chansey's fat. It takes everything ever. Knockoff is a thing. Even on like special tigers like Gardevoir gets it, and Alakazam gets it, and people are probably gonna run it depending on how experienced they are, and it's just not gonna have a fun time. Chansey is like the definition of setup fodder, like after Alamola, I suppose, but Chansey is setup fodder. If you have something with, over 100 HP, you can set up a sub on it very freely. Or base HP, 100 base HP. Set up a sub, you're good to go. Chansey can't do shit to you. And then your opponent is in trouble. A lot of times, Chansey is going to be the only switch into certain threats, and opponents can't prep for that. Now, I think we all know the negative sides of Chansey, so I'm going to talk about a little bit about the few, very, very, very few positive things about Chansey. Unlike a lot of other walls, you can't just be like, okay, this is a 100% safe switch into my offensive threat. I'm just gonna pack Toxic to wear everything down because natural cure is there. I don't know why an egg gets healed when it switches, but that's the point. I also get Stealth Rocks. Stealth Rocks are always good, and Chansey is gonna get them up. You're probably gonna lose afterwards because your opponent's gonna set up on a turn, but hey, it gets up Rocks. Rocks are cool. It gets Wish, which Chansey's wishes are ridiculous. You heal some things back to full, like completely. Like you can heal up your team. You can keep your team healthy with Aromatherapy, Heal Bell, whichever one gets. Doesn't it get both? I don't know. The healing move, okay? Yeah. It gets both. There you go. Yes. Like you can do that, but 35 special attack, 5 attack. You're not doing anything offensively outside of Seismic Toss. And unlike in Standard, I really think Blissey is better than Chansey because you can actually run special moves like Flamethrower and whatnot. Chansey cannot do. I mean, can. It's not gonna get you anywhere though. So I don't like Chansey. It's really, really bad. If you want to redraft Chansey, just draft Porygon 2 instead. That's my advice for everyone ever. yeah, don't draft Chansey. It's bad. That's all I have to say. Terrible Pokemon.
Okay. So, I mean, you covered that, I think, pretty well. There are definitely good things about Chansey. The big thing... there are a couple of big things about it. It's a very good status inflictor, like Toxic and Thunder Wave on things that don't have sub, or if your opponent just can't touch you, you know they're switching out, so you can just throw off like a Thunder Wave or a Toxic or something like that. Literally, not I guess literally, but pretty much the only thing that Chansey does over P2 is Stealth Rock.
Yeah.
Like being able to, which are nice. Like if you're looking for another Stealth Rocker, then that's, I guess, the biggest reason you'd pick Chansey over something like P2. That, and I guess being able to Wish Pass. But Wish Pass in draft format, not necessarily the best. Plus the Cleric thing as well, which is really nice. It's a good supportive mon, but that's all it does. It does absolutely nothing offensively, unless you're running like the rare counter Chansey, which people have run before. Despite it having literally 5 base physical defense, it can take physical hits surprisingly well. We've seen that in the past. I think it took like a +2 Escavalier Mega Horn and then countered and then knocked out the Escavalier. It's just, oh yeah, it's really, really bulky, and you're very rarely OHKOing this thing unless you have a stab physical fighting move. But like you mentioned, this thing is incredibly easy to set up on. Genuinely anything with an HP stat of 100 or higher can set up a substitute on this thing and then start going to town on it. Knockoff is very common, and you will be able to probably knock this thing off just because like you can run knockoff on a lot of special attackers. I remember a while ago I ran knockoff on Alakazam, and then suddenly you're able to 2-KO this thing with Psyshock. You can run knockoff on like something like Cofagrigus that it may want to switch into. So it's good if your opponent doesn't prep for it, but they always are.
If you're in a league full of inexperienced players, I guess you can draft it. It's gonna be really annoying. You know.
Again, there are like, but this is also a mon. If you're going to draft something like Chansey, you need to draft other things that take care of all of Chansey's weaknesses. For example, fighting types. Like if you pair this thing, I think pairing Chansey with something like Zapdos is actually really solid, because A, you're dealing with the fighting types that Chansey doesn't like to do. You can Whirlwind out setup sweepers that Chansey doesn't want to do, even if they're like sub users. You're also going to want kind of like a solid ground type versus this thing, and like good Volt Turn stoppage, just because even though it has really good SpDef and probably takes like 12% from any Volt switch at maximum, it will be worn down if there are hazards up and you're continuously switching into Volt switches. Again, the problem with this thing is just it's probably one of the most passive Pokemon in existence. Like, it genuinely does absolutely nothing offensively. Base 35 special attack is not good enough to run offensive moves, unless it's like 4 times weak to it and you invest a little bit in special attack, which is weird, and it's like a frail Pokemon to begin with. Like, I'm pretty sure Fire Blast from Chansey does like 30% to Sizzler. Maybe like a little bit more than that, but maybe Mega Sizzler. It does absolutely nothing, and you can just set up all over them.
Yeah, I feel like one decent partner would be like Clefable. Because like, Clefable can chew knockoffs and fighting moves pretty well.
Yeah.
And Unaware means, hey, he's set up, I don't really care. And you can keep Unaware Clefable healthy with Chansey, with Aromatherapy and with Wish and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So Moonlight isn't as big of a problem. So you could do that, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's still a Chansey.
Yeah, or like Dan did Season 4, I think, is you pair it with Mega Sableye, and then that's also very good.
But it's also gross. I don't like that. Okay,
alright.
Chansey. Don't draft it.
That is Chansey. Yeah, try not to draft it. If you are going to draft it, please, please acknowledge that everything that your opponent has will be able to set up on it.
Yeah.
Alright, but back into better territory. I believe it's my turn. Is it? We went on that rant for a while. We're now moving on to the Mega Charizards. We're going to start off with Mega Charizard X. This is a mon that people either think it's like the best mon in draft format, or people think it absolutely sucks. We are of the opinion that it's really friggin' good. It's especially if you build around it properly. It's a very, very good Dragon Dance sweeper. It has very solid bulk. Not even looking at its very powerful attack stats, but it's got very solid bulk, 78 HP, and then 111 defense, 85 SPDF. You can build this thing more SPDF, you can build this thing as somewhat of a wall, you can switch into a lot of different things. Fire Dragon is a very good defensive typing. Obviously, losing its flying typing means you're then weak to Earthquake, but obviously you can play around that. Earthquake is relatively easy to patch up on a team. You're 1 time weak to rocks, you lose your 4 times rock weakness, which is nice. And it is incredibly powerful offensively. It does have a 130 special attack stat, which is definitely usable, but because it has Tough Claws, because it has more powerful physical stab, in Flare Blitz you're typically going to be running something like that. Flare Blitz from a Tough Claws boosted Mega Charizard X just 2 KOs so much. There's very little that you can deal with, and water types aren't even a good switch in, because you can't be burnt by Scald, obviously, because you're a fire type. You can set up all over them. You have secondary stab in either Dragon Claw or Outrage to hit them, and usually you're going to 2 KO them, unless it's something like Alomomola, which even then you can set up on even further. It's just such a powerful Pokemon. It obviously has things like Earthquake to hit opposing fire types that you wouldn't be able to hit super effectively. It has things like Thunder Punch, which don't see a lot of usage because you don't typically need it, but it is there. It gets things like Rock Slide, Shadow Claw. It is a Swords Dance setter as well, which also is usable but not super common. You can even run like, as Tup did last season, Belly Drum Flame Charge, which is really cool. You can also run like SD Flame Charge if you wanted to. It just has a lot, it has a lot of solid offensive options, and you never even have to use them. You can just run the standard Dragon Dance Roost 2 attack set, and usually it'll put in a lot of work. This is a mon that you definitely have to baby a little bit in team building. Like, you need good hazard removal. Typically people like to pair this thing with Starmie because they cover each other's weaknesses very well. Starmie obviously rapid spins, but really just a good rapid spinner to go along with this thing, good defogger as well to deal with it. I think we haven't even talked about just the bulkier Dragon Dance set, the 1 attack Roost Dragon Dance Will-O-Wisp set, which is really, really good as well. It's just such a powerful Pokemon. You take the head on this one. You go ahead. I'll continue with this later.
Okay, I know your GBA fan subscribers are gonna be like, no, the thing is bad. It has never done anything in GBA. It hasn't. Don't ask me why. I don't understand it either. In other leagues, it has been really, really successful.
Again, it either does really, really well, or it just does absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And it's weird.
I have a lot of friends who absolutely love this thing. I wouldn't personally draft it because, like, it forces you to bring hazard removal, and if you know me, I tend to not bring hazard removal because fuck that.
Yeah, not just the Rock's weakness, but also just you're weakening yourself with Flare Blitz if you decide to run that.
Absolutely. That's another issue it has. If you want to, like, actually kill everything ever, you have to run Flare Blitz. Otherwise, you'll need to set up to kill things with Fire Punch. And having his 2 dual steps, his 2 strong steps, having such a huge, negative side in recall or being locked into it and having confusion at the end is not great for Zard X. But the thing is still really bulky, I think, and really strong, of course. I think bulky setup is probably the best thing you can do. And its biggest enemy is probably also status. The thing is, T-Waves are toxic. It's not going to be really happy. It's going to get worn down with toxic, and T-Wave is just slower. You can kill it with your multiple Earthquake users on your draft that you probably have. Probably not one shot to kill it. Bulky. But yeah, if you can prevent a thing from getting status and you can get into the right position, it's probably going to sweep more than once a season.
Oh, absolutely.
The thing is really threatening. Having to prep for it is an absolute nightmare. Because, like, hey, I would like to not get swept by Zard X. Well, first I need something that doesn't get 2-KO'd by anything. That'd be cool. You don't have that, and then you're sad. You just have to play offensively around the thing, which is probably going to result in it getting a kill. Somewhat similar to Zoomal, as we mentioned before. Like, you don't want it to set up, and in order for that to happen, you should probably sack something. It's such a strong Pokemon, such a good typing. As I mentioned, the SD Tailwind is also really scary, because if you just want to break down a fat team, you just SD. You don't even need the Dragon Dance boost, you just kill everything. But if your opponent brings a more faster variant of that team, you click Tailwind and you kill everything, because the faster ones are usually frail, or frailer, more frail, English. And then you just... It does things, it's ow, Zardex is scary. I don't know why people don't like it. Like, ever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. It's just, like, of course 100 base speed is not optimal. I think those days are over where 100 base speed was good. But again, it's bulk, it's typing, and Dragon Dance, and its power just make up for it, in my opinion, completely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zardex also looks cool. Makes your opponent sad because it's an edgy dragon that kills you.
Does look very cool. I will agree.
That's the most important part.
Yeah, like I always found it funny how this thing is a fire and dragon type, but it like beats every water type and fairy that exists.
Oh yeah.
Like even if you have like Unoracle Fable, that's getting two-shotted anyway.
Oh, it does. Yeah, I have.
Like easily, it's easily getting two-shotted. Like I think it OHKOs floor just at +1. It OHKOs just probably. It OHKOs so like even without a Dragon Dance, it's OHKOing a lot. Like it's not it's not easy to switch into. I think like it forces people with Rotom to run T-Wave and stuff like that. Yeah. But like you said, it is relatively. There are a lot of ways to deal with it, and the ways you deal with it kind of just completely shut it down. Like if you Thunder Wave this thing, it'll hit hard and it might get 1 kill, but then after that it's kind of useless. If you poison it, and its best move to hit you with Flare Blitz, it's going to be worn down very quickly. Things like that. It's obviously weak to rocks, and with Flare Blitz recoil, it's tough to pull off a successful sweep. Excuse me. Awesome. It can be tough to pull off a successful sweep with this thing, but if you're a solid player, you've built around this thing very well, you have proper hazard removal, you send this in at the right time, it can just absolutely destroy teams. And like you said, it is terrifying to prep for. I think it's a little bit it's a little bit scarier to prep for than it is to play for, because a lot of times you will be able to find a way to stop Megazord X from doing what it wants to do. But that doesn't stop the fear that you have while prepping for this thing, because you're looking at your team and you're like, oh my god, not only does it 2 KO everything before a Dragon Dance, but then a lot of rosters, you look at it after it's set up a Dragon Dance and you're like, oh my god, this OHKO's literally everything.
Yep. Not to mention, like, Will-O-Wisp sets are really good as well.
Oh yeah, we haven't even brought up the bulky set yet. Super bulky, really good typing. A lot of times you will be able to run just Flare Blitz and no other attacking moves, because fire is relatively spammable across teams. And the ability to burn a lot of physical attackers that might want to switch into this thing are really, really nice. Like, suppose your opponent has a Quagsire, or like an unaware Quagsire, one of the few things that isn't 2 KO'd by standard Charizard X. If you're not running Hidden Power Grass, you can at least like run... Yeah, you can run something like Will-O-Wisp, and then you're not getting 2 KO'd by Earthquake, you're just able to continuously set up on it, you can stall it out of recovers, weaken it with Dragon Claw, things like that, so it's just... Or, well, just weaken it with Flare Blitz in general, because you're probably not running Dragon Claw in that situation, unless your opponent doesn't have a Fairy, in which they're dumb. But...
or unlucky, and that's not.
Yeah. So, Itzamon, if you build around it properly, it should be able to do a lot for you. It's not a mon for everyone, because like you said, you do typically have to run hazard removal with this thing, and neither of us typically like to do that, because we like just hitting things instead of getting rid of rocks on our side of the field.
We'll go into Wave.
Yeah. But it's a terrifying mon to prep for. If used properly, it can just straight up 6-0 teams. And it has happened before. So that is Mega Charizard X. Now, we're going to be moving on to another form of Charizard.
I wonder which one's this going to be.
It's actually Charizard Z.
Oh shit.
It just becomes a
fire flying dragon type.
Just becomes a slug. Anyway, I think who took the lead with X? That was me. All right, so
my turn.
All right, Zard Y, go ahead.
Zard Y. I don't have much of an opinion on Zard Y because it's very straightforward of a Pokemon. 159 special attack with drought boosted fire moves is not fun. The thing is a ridiculously strong wall breaker. I don't care if you resist Fire Blast, it's gonna do at least 40% to almost everything that isn't like Goodra or multi-scale D-Knight. Like, the thing is stupidly strong. The combination of Fire Blast in the Sun and Solar Beam, which again, because of Drought, you can just click that, is incredibly hard to switch into. It's almost impossible, because the few things that resist that, which are usually dragons, I think that's almost it.
Yeah, like both of the Charizard forms just don't give a shit about water types, which is hilarious.
So like even those switch-ins can be hit really hard with like Dragon Pulse or whatever the fuck you want to run. And then there's also the option of running Dragon Dance, which the thing, even though it's much stronger on the special side, 104 physical attack, a +1 boost, and the fire thing, the sun, that's the one. Fire thing. Fire thing in the sky, amazing. Flare Blitz is gonna hit really, really hard. It's gonna be a little harder to hit those water types, but if your opponent doesn't have a good water type, which they're not gonna switch into anyway, it's gonna look grim with a DD ZY. If your opponent has a certain switch and it can deal with a special one, which, like Gudra, you just DD on the switch, and then it might just be game. This thing is one of the best wall breakers, in my opinion, but it has even more of an issue with acid removal, because it keeps that 4 times weakness. You're gonna probably have to switch out after you kill one thing, and if your opponent gets up rocks, yeah, you're gonna have some trouble. You need acid removal with the thing even more than you do with Zard X, because the thing doesn't get as many opportunities to roost up, I think, in my opinion, as Zard X. It also gets Tailwind, of course, because it's the same goddamn Pokemon. And the thing on a Tailwind, it's rip. Not fun. Kills everything. Of course, only has 5 turns of Sun. Can't have the old Stone thingy to have 8 turns, because that would be even more sad. But hey, it still kills like a lot in those 5 turns. Of course, it does have a 4 turns weakness, so it's very easy to revenge kill. But if you just look for a good wall breaker and for some Sun support for your team, maybe you have like a regular Venus or whatever, whatever else, like a bunch of Chlorophyll sweeps exist, to just pick one, pair it up with the thing, and you're gonna have fun. You're gonna have that Sun from ZY, not as reliably as with like Ninetales, but Ninetales is bad. But you're gonna have Sun, you're gonna have this amazing wall breaker, and you're gonna have a great sweeper late game with Sun, and that combination is really, really good, really underrated in draft format. And I think, ZY should be used more. Also, there's the fun option of running something like Focus Punch, because again, if your opponent somehow drafts Chansey, you can hit it on switching with a Focus Punch instead of Focus Blast, because memes. You can also hit T-Tar on the switching, reliably, kind of. Depends on if you want to say Focus Punch is more reliable than Focus Blast. That, I think, depends on your luck and your prediction game, but I think that's a pretty cool option. I've seen before. It's pretty spicy, in my opinion. So yeah, it's ZY, it's strong.
Absolutely. I think Zard Y is actually one of the more underutilized Pokemon in draft format. Like, you don't see it go too often. But like, if you go back to, I think, Fizz's, was it season 5 team? Or whatever, where he had like the cool dual weather stuff. Zard Y just gives, it's one of those mons that if you just draft it by itself, and like don't draft any weather sweepers with it, it's fine, but it also turns mons that are already pretty good, like Heliolisk and like something like Shiftry, regular Venusaur, and it gives them potential to be even better, just with the Sun. Like, herein, I think, like, Scarf, Solar Power, Heliolisk, and then you got like a super fast, super powerful thing that just spammed electric moves or Hyper Voice and things like that. It was really, really good. You can pair it with something like Shiftry, and suddenly you can run like Adamant, and Adamant Life Orb knockoff hurts. You do have the priority Sucker Punch as well. Grass typing as well, or the Grass Stab as well is really, really nice for things like that. But just on its own, Zard Y is, I think, even better in draft format than it is in Standard. In Standard, it's super solid because, like you said, it 2 KOs pretty much everything other than, like, in Standard, it 2 KOs like literally everything other than Chansey and then like Latias.
And like Chomp, I think.
Probably Garchomp, maybe.
Yeah.
But like, it's not gonna have as bad a 4 move slot syndrome in draft format. Like, you're gonna run a fire move that's gonna 2 KO or OHKO like most things, and then if your opponent has like a dragon type that might want to switch into it, like a Druddigon or a Dragonite or like even a Lottie, you can 2 KO them with Dragon Pulse, and there's not much your opponent can do about it because everything else that they have is 2 KO, so you know that they have to switch into that thing. If you're going up against something like a Heatran, you can run either Focus Blast for a 2 KO or Earthquake for just a straight up OHKO. Like, this thing does have, like you mentioned, with a base 104 attack stat, it does have mixed options with like Earthquake and Rock Slide and things like that. And even Flare Blitz. People have run Flare Blitz on this thing before just to hit things like Chansey. Even though you're taking a lot of recoil, you still do a lot of damage. To hit things like Florges with just a very high natural special attack stat. In draft format, there's almost nothing that can switch into Zard Y, and it's just an incredibly solid wall breaker because of that. Like like you said earlier as well, rocks are this thing's biggest problem. Like, just switching it in and losing 50% of your HP, not being able to immediately roost that away, like Talonflame would be able to because of Gale Wings. Its speed at base 100 isn't great, it's good enough for a wall breaker, but it's not amazing. And I think something we haven't touched on yet is its Spadef stat, which is ridiculous at base 115. Like, you can, if you wanted to, you could stay in on some electric types, Volt Switch or even Thunderbolt, and just kill them with Fire Blast if you wanted to. I'm pretty sure this thing lives Assault Vest's Raiku's Thunderbolt.
I'm fairly sure it does, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it does. Like, its Spadef is really good. That's why it's like a really good switch into water types, funnily enough. With the Sun, you're weakening Scalds to begin with, and then your Spadef is good enough to just tank it. Like, it's so bulky on the special side. It's so powerful. Like, 159 special attack in the Sun, Stab Fire Blast is 2-KOing everything bar things like Latias or things with ridiculous Spadef like Chansey, and then you have other coverage moves to hit them that you wouldn't necessarily run in Standard.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that being said, I think we're gonna call this episode here. We've been going for almost an hour at this point.
Jesus.
So, yeah, so, we're probably going to do another session right after this. We want to keep this series going. So thank you guys very much for watching. If you want to like plug your shitty channel or whatever, you can go ahead and do that now.
My channel is better than Monos because I'm me. You can watch me play draft format. I don't almost exclusively do draft format, BBL, GBC, and you can watch that and watch me choke. That's what I do. Occasionally I have some spicy memes. Those are cool too. That's all I have.
Alright. Thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know what you think of this series in the comment section below, how we can improve it, how you guys like it, and we'll see you in the next one.
Goodbye.